Otto Kittel's life is often remembered through the extraordinary number of aerial victories he achieved during the Second World War. But behind the figures was a young man shaped by circumstance, training, and the unfolding devastation of the Eastern Front. His story is not one of grand speeches or public fame during his own lifetime, but of a quiet, determined fighter pilot whose skill and persistence eventually made him one of the highest-scoring aces in aviation history. Kittel was born on February 21, 1917, in the small village of Kronsdorf, in what was then German Silesia. His upbringing was modest, and he did not come from a military family. Instead, like many boys of his era, he grew up during a period of economic hardship, political instability, and rapid social change. Aviation was still a relatively new field, but it captured the imagination of many young people who viewed flight as a symbol of modernity and adventure. By the time Kittel reached adulthood, Germany was rearming, and the Luftwaffe offered a structured career path for men with mechanical aptitude, discipline, and the willingness to undergo demanding training. Kittel entered the Luftwaffe in the late 1930s. His early years were spent in basic training and flight instruction, where he showed steady progress rather than exceptional natural talent. He was not known for flamboyant flying or dramatic maneuvers. Instead, instructors noted his precision, seriousness, and consistency. These qualities, while less glamorous, would become the foundation of his later success. When the Second World War began in 1939, he was still completing his preparation and was assigned to Jagdgeschwader 54, a fighter wing that would become one of the most active units on the Eastern Front. JG-54, sometimes called the Green Hearts because of its emblem, fought in varied and often harsh environments. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941, Kittel was still a relatively inexperienced pilot. The Eastern Front was vast, brutal, and chaotic, with far more air activity than in Western Europe. Soviet aircraft were often numerically superior, and the fighting stretched over forests, marshlands, and cities. For a pilot like Kittel, this meant flying multiple missions a day, often in extreme weather, and constantly adapting to shifting front lines. His first aerial victories came during this period, and from then on his tally increased steadily. Unlike some famous fighter aces who racked up victories in short bursts, Kittel's success developed through persistent daily flying. He became known for discipline in combat, attacking with calculated precision rather than aggression for its own sake. Colleagues remembered him as quiet and reserved, rarely drawing attention to himself even as his reputation grew. Kittel flew primarily the Messerschmitt Bf-109 and later the Focke-Wulf FW-190, both mainstays of the Luftwaffe's fighter force. The shift to the FW-190 suited his methodical style. The aircraft was rugged, with strong firepower and good low-altitude performance, features that were crucial for the close support and frontline interception missions that defined the Eastern Front. Soviet pilots became increasingly skilled as the war progressed, and by 1943, the Luftwaffe no longer held clear dominance in the air. Despite this, Kittel continued to score victories at a remarkable rate, often against well-flown Yak and La-5 fighters. The life of a frontline pilot was extremely demanding. Hours were long, rest was brief, and survival often depended on reacting within seconds. Many of Kittel's peers were killed or wounded, and pilots lived with the constant awareness that each mission could be their last. Yet Kittel remained almost detached in his focus. He was not known to celebrate his victories loudly, nor did he pursue fame. His superiors valued him for his reliability and the morale boost that his consistent performance gave to his unit. He received several decorations as his tally rose, including the Knight's Cross and later the Oak Leaves, but these formal honors mattered less day-to-day than his role within the squadron as a dependable leader in the air. By late 1943 and early 1944, the situation for Germany had deteriorated severely. The Red Army was advancing, the Luftwaffe was stretched thin, and fuel shortages were becoming common. Despite the worsening strategic situation, Kittel's personal performance remained extraordinarily high. He surpassed 100 victories, then 150, and ultimately exceeded 260. Each of these numbers represents a dangerous encounter, often at low altitude against escort fighters, attack aircraft, and sometimes heavy defenses on the ground. It was a brutal and unforgiving kind of air war, and few pilots survived long enough to accumulate such experience. Kittel did not fly solely as a lone fighter seeking enemy aircraft. Much of his work involved protecting ground troops, intercepting Soviet attack aircraft, and supporting retreating German units. These tasks required quick reactions and tight coordination with fellow pilots. Although he was not a flamboyant leader, his calmness and consistent judgment made him a stabilizing presence. New pilots often looked to him for guidance, and his behavior set a tone of professionalism even amid the growing desperation around them. As the front lines continued moving westward, JG-54 was pushed back through the Baltic regions. The airfields became increasingly makeshift, the logistics more fragile, and the missions more dangerous. The Luftwaffe was losing many of its most experienced pilots to exhaustion, attrition, or transfers to defense of the Reich. Kittel remained at the front, still flying combat sorties almost daily. In early 1945, with the war nearing its end, he had surpassed 260 confirmed victories, placing him among the highest-scoring fighter pilots of all time. Yet with the collapse of Germany imminent, such records offered little comfort or practical advantage. The Red Army was advancing rapidly, and German forces were in retreat almost everywhere. The air war was becoming even more hazardous, with overwhelming Soviet numbers able to press attacks even with heavy losses. Kittel was killed on February 14, 1945, during a mission near the Courland Pocket, a region where surrounded German forces were holding out. He was flying an FW-190 on an interception mission against Soviet ground attack aircraft when his plane was hit, reportedly by return fire from an IL-2 Sturmovik. His aircraft went down, and he did not survive the crash. He was less than a week from his 28th birthday. His death, like that of so many pilots of the era, came swiftly and without ceremony. There was little time for mourning, as his unit continued fighting for survival. The war would end less than 3 months later. In the post-war years, Otto Kittel's name gradually became known among historians and aviation enthusiasts, particularly because his total of 267 victories placed him among the top few fighter aces in history. Yet his story is often overshadowed by larger political and military narratives of the war, and the extremes of ideology and destruction that marked the Nazi regime. Understanding Kittel's career requires recognizing both his exceptional technical skill and the tragic, devastating context in which it developed. His life illustrates the paradox of many fighter pilots who operated within a deeply destructive system while developing individual mastery under impossible conditions. Kittel was not a public political figure, nor did he shape the policies that drove the war. He was a trained serviceman who carried out the duties assigned to him, and in doing so he became extraordinarily proficient at a task that was itself part of a much wider tragedy. His achievements in the cockpit were real, but they existed inside a conflict that brought immense suffering across Europe, and especially on the Eastern Front, where entire regions were devastated. After the war, records from both German and Soviet sources were studied to better understand the scale and accuracy of claims made by pilots like Kittel. While different air forces kept records differently, historians generally agree that his documented record is substantial and credible. Yet numbers alone cannot convey the human element behind them. Each mission involved a mixture of tension, fatigue, concentration, and the constant reality of danger. The longevity of Kittel's frontline service stands out even more than the numbers themselves, as very few pilots in any air force survived repeated operations for so many years. Today, Kittel's life is studied not to glorify warfare, but to understand the experience of individuals caught within it. He represents the kind of pilot who was not flamboyant, not politically prominent, and not widely recognized outside aviation circles, yet who played a significant part in the air war on the Eastern Front. His story serves as a reminder that history is shaped not only by high-ranking leaders and major battles, but also by the countless individuals who endured the daily realities of a conflict that reshaped the world. Kittel's legacy, therefore, is complex. His technical skill and combat record make him one of the most capable fighter pilots of the Second World War. At the same time, his career was inseparable from a war that caused catastrophic loss of life and suffering. Remembering him involves acknowledging both the human qualities he demonstrated as a pilot and the broader consequences of the conflict he served in. Through this wider perspective, his biography becomes not just a recounting of aerial victories, but a reflection on the turbulent era that defined his life and ended it far too early. Thanks for watching. If you have a thought regarding Otto Kittel, drop it in a comment below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe.